So I'm Simi Burn, PharmD, and I'm a pharmacist turned ghostwriter. And I've been obsessed with using voice to create written content for several years before I found Carbon Voice. So the very first time, I actually don't think I would have become a writer if it weren't for the realization that I could speak first and then use the transcripts to create written content. Um, and that really blew my mind because I had always thought about writing, this was several years ago, as like opening a blank document and starting with the first line of the first paragraph, but it's so much easier for me and for many, if not most people, to communicate their ideas through conversation and verbally. So the very first time I did that was very old school, recording a voice memo on my phone and then playing it. This was several years ago before all of the advances we have now. And then I played the recording to the dictation feature on Google Docs and walked away. And so there was no punctuation, very inaccurate, no organization, but it was still a huge um, cathartic moment for me to realize I could create written content by talking to myself. And so that's actually how I got my start in writing. Before that, I wasn't writing in a professional sense or wouldn't even see myself as somebody who could write. And so that idea, as I advanced as a writer, always stayed in my mind that I think there's more people like me who have stories to share or topics to teach, things inside of them that could be written if they only had a conversational, natural way to put that to the page. And but the tools that most people are used to are things like dictation or where you're basically going line by line. And so I was really excited with the advances that started developing with like AI powered note takers and how to use meeting transcriptions and use them to do other things. And so that was kind of the journey that I was on for several years, pretty obsessed with it, alongside whatever else I was doing. I shared about using voice tools for writing content, but then what I was using was not really designed for creating content. It was more, or I wasn't able to customize what I was doing as well. So I was using things like note takers that are designed for conversations during a Zoom call, or I tried several other, you know, tools. And so the frustrations, the challenges that I faced were many. Sometimes it was a recording time limit that cut me off. And I've used Carbon Voice to do all kinds of things from journaling to like writing whole books to ghostwriting books. So cutting off how much that I can speak was a huge limitation, or where it was just cumbersome. And it ended up being the same problem that I had before, where I just had a whole bunch of transcripts and it might as well be a black box. They were just piling up on each other, and I realized I'm not actually going to do anything with these because I can't find anything. It was not productive or efficient for me to utilize the transcripts. I used for quite a while an automation that was sending transcripts to my Notion page, but um, that was also not very useful because let's say that I had an idea that was 30 or 40 minutes worth of talking, then my options are either to record multiple separate messages and then try to piece them together, which none of the tools were very easy to do that with, or have a huge long transcript and then now it's like trying to sort out a big ball of tangled yarn to get to the idea that was very easy for me to say, but then turning that into a usable form was just really disorganized and cumbersome. So I think that the big difference with Carbon Voice for me is that I can be in control of how I'm organizing the transcripts. And I can think of one of the big differences. I can think about this ahead of time and plan this out strategically so that um, the voice transcripts are organized in a very efficient way that is designed with my intended goal in mind. So then when I'm utilizing them, it isn't just a ball of yarn. It's already organized. Most of the work is already done for me. So a huge this is a huge change. So for example, I used so with helping people write content as a ghostwriter, I have to interview people and listen to what they're saying and ask questions behind to get the story behind the story, be present and engaged as a listener so that a lot of the nonverbal communication or the things that I know to be true or the goal that this person has, this client I'm working with or whatever I'm doing, that can come through on the transcript. So, but that transcript, if it's like just an AI meeting note taker, is not that friendly really or useful for writers. And that's what most ghostwriters do is just live interviews or live calls. Um, with Carbon Voice, I can do that in the same way, but in a much more organized and effective way. And then, what's great about it is we can meet at a specific time to have a conversation, or we can be just talking whenever inspiration strikes. And so that has been a huge benefit as well. I wanted to say the same thing. So I wouldn't have even considered ghostwriting books without Carbon Voice. And so most ghostwriters, I mean, there's some that specialize in books. Most of us don't want to do books because it is way too time consuming. There's way too many meetings involved. It is extremely difficult to find time, for somebody as busy as Rosa. What we would have had to do to get the same project accomplished would have been much longer than 4 hours because so like say we met an hour at a time, she's not going to be talking straight for an hour on command during that meeting, right? We're having a conversation that's happening naturally in Rosa's spare time and in my spare time, but it would have taken more than double that amount of time. I would estimate maybe an hour meeting for at least 12 weeks, and that's a pretty conservative estimate. So now that's a huge project, a huge commitment, and also unrealistic because I don't know about you, Rosa, and this is feedback I've heard from all of the authors that I've worked with. Sometimes the good ideas that people are recording were at odd times, in the middle of the night, early in the morning, 2 minutes here, 5 minutes here, because your subconscious is working on this. A book is really long. That's the point of it. It's very long form content. And so to access all of the ideas and to kind of let that marinate and process in your subconscious, it works much better if it's not all at once performing on command and if it can be a little bit at a time, which would have been an absolute, you know, impossibility with live meetings, but also just really time consuming and therefore very expensive. And so that's what's really exciting about using Carbon Voice is it can make this a lot more accessible for either, ghostwriters like myself or aspiring authors to do this. So I wanted, yeah, I wouldn't have even considered trying to ghostwrite books the way that I was using voice tools before. Maybe at the maximum writing books myself might have been a possibility, but I was doing that and it was just really cumbersome. But I definitely wouldn't have had um, the capacity to do this with others because it just wouldn't have been feasible. That would have been a huge undertaking that I think. And so I've worked with several authors now who have either partially written or completed either books or chapters of books. I helped both of my parents start their memoirs. I've helped others start their memoirs. These are, and every single one of them would not have written their book or their content without voice. They wouldn't, they hadn't, they wouldn't. And so it's not that we were competing with other voice tools. We were just competing with nothing at all because none of those solutions were effective or efficient or accessible. And another thing, so this is kind of a project that's been developing, but another thing I'm really excited about with this is that it's removing barriers to authorship. I mean, this if somebody can speak and listen, if somebody can have a conversation, now they can be an author. They don't even have to be able to read visually. They just need to speak and listen. That's huge, and really exciting. So I'm excited about the ways that it can remove barriers for people who either want to interview and listen to other stories or help them share their messages in different ways, or for people who want to create written content through voice. So for me, I found Carbon Voice. I had been posting on LinkedIn about some of my experiments with using voice to create content, and Travis reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, I saw your post about this and shared that he's the founder of Carbon Voice and asked me if I would like to do a quick demo. And what I was immediately struck by, because I'm an entrepreneur as well, and I mean, how quickly we were able to remove the inefficiencies of here's my calendar link, schedule a meeting, then show up for the meeting, and then we don't even remember why we're on the meeting, and all of this other stuff that we have to do just to have a conversation, where the moment that I um, saw his message and he sent me a link, I'll show you a quick demo. That's the easiest way. I was like, sure. And how easily and quickly we were able to get in contact and communicate um, has been remarkable. And then also, just, sometimes if I have a question or an idea or something comes to mind, I can send to different people, to Travis or to others, without having to schedule a meeting or write an email. So the ease of communication, it just feels like we're right there, much closer. And, it reminds me more of, like, I grew up, I was a teenager in the 90s. We did everything on the phone. I had very strict parents. So if I wanted to do anything, like, I had to do it on the phone. And it kind of, it made me realize how much we've shifted to texting, but this is like a phone call, but way better. And so we can have that closeness of communication, kind of spontaneity, without necessarily having to pick up the phone at that moment, which is really nice. One feature I think is really exciting in particular for a lot of different use cases I'm thinking about. I tried this recently. What I did is pre-planned, prepared interview questions for somebody to help them write a essay. And um, so I thought about that ahead of time and how to get what I needed in the transcript, not knowing what they were going to say yet. And I pre-recorded these questions just naturally in my voice. And then when it came time to the interview, so for this one, we met together at a specific time. I was able to take those pre-recorded messages after, we had our kind of intro meet and greet, and drop them into the thread. And so while the person I was interviewing was listening, I didn't have to worry about what am I going to ask next. I didn't have to worry about if I was going to remember to to go in order. And so my mind was able to completely focus on what she was saying. And then at the same time, I was taking her content and using it to write for her. So by the end of an hour, we were able to create like sort of like a memoir chapter plus a whole bunch of social media content all within that same amount of time because I was able to pre-record my interview questions. So I'm thinking about that in terms of people who, ask the same types of questions to people over and over again. The power of scaling yourself as an interviewer by recording these questions ahead of time is really exciting. And that's another project I'm in the beginning stages of working on now, where there's a group of people all going to answer the same questions. And I can just pre-record these questions and send them out all at once to all of these different people. And they can be responding all at the same time. That's incredible. I don't know any other way I would do something like that other than sending a mass email, which is really different because then you're responding and writing. It's just completely different dynamic. So, the ability to can an interview, I'm sure could be really beneficial to all kinds of people who need to ask repetitive questions to different people over and over and need to take the transcripts and do stuff with them. To be able to pre-record your questions and drop them into a thread, it just removed how much of my focus and attention had to go toward saying things in the conversation so that I could just completely listen and write. But from the interviewee's perspective, I was there in my voice right with her, and I was, and but I didn't have to. It was like there were 3 or 4 of me working at the same time. It was really mind-boggling. We mentioned Rosa spoke for about 4 hours, and from that source of transcripts, I was able to weave that into a book written in her voice. It's her words, her perspective. All of that is there, but that rich source of conversational transcript also added to what I had to work with. Had I done something like this without carbon voice, so I mentioned I would estimate at least 12 1-hour interviews plus, so we would both have to be there. So, I'm listening to these 4 hours, but just like Rosa, I'm listening when I'm folding laundry or multitasking and I'm thinking about it, and or I could skim visually what she's saying and then listen to her tone of voice or expression later, right? So it's been able to kind of seep into the small little spaces in day-to-day life in a way that an hour-long weekly interview never would, you know. And then on top of that, being able to write at the same time or listen while I'm looking at her book would not be possible during a live interview. So I don't even know. So those 1-hour meetings, I would say at least 2 hours, so maybe 36 hours to process all of that, right? Um, I don't know how long I spent actually on the drafting, and some of it was just trial and error time because it was trying to figure out how to do that. I know that, and it's been much faster for me now. As I mentioned, I was able to create a whole standalone chapter within the 1-hour interview of somebody I interviewed recently. So, you know, that's pretty incredible as a business owner that relies often on interviewing people and using the transcripts to do stuff. I mean, that's taking my time from, I would estimate 36 hours, probably down to maybe like 10 or so total to do this. And and as I mentioned, it wouldn't have even happened at all. So we're not even really comparing 36 hours to 10 hours. It's like we're comparing 10 hours to no book at all. Because that's probably, I mean, I wouldn't have been ghostwriting books without this. And then So another kind of quantifiable thing, I use Carbon Voice all the time on like monologue. I have multiple threads of different things that maybe different projects that I'm adding notes to. I use it to journal. I use it for stream of consciousness journaling. I use it um, for business strategy planning with myself. Um, I mentioned using it to just capture all the to-do lists and things like that that are important. I even have a thread for uh, meditations, like affirmations in my own voice that I listen to and can hear myself talking. I know that that has a huge impact, and the neuroscience backs that up. So I listen to that sometimes, and I just record, add something to it here and there, so that it's when I feel really good, it's fresh in my mind. So I think that there's so many ways that I've used Carbon Voice, and another huge time saver. So one weekend I actually wrote. This was like before I worked with Rosa. I wanted to test this out with a book writing process. So I hydrated, I packed up snacks, and I went on a very, very long walk, probably like several hours, a long walk. And I created the transcripts. I came home, it took me another few hours, and wrote a whole book in a weekend. Most of the desk work was just processing transcripts, but all of that happened on a very long walk, which makes sense because, I mean, if you think about an audiobook, depending on how long it is, it might be a few hours. So it makes sense. You just have to talk for a few hours and then weave it together in a coherent way into a book. But um, yeah, I definitely wouldn't have done that with my weekend if I weren't able to use voice. So prior to my career in writing, I was working in healthcare administration, and we had multiple shifts. So often I wouldn't even see or get to interact with my overnight shift team.
Mhm.
And so communication between shifts either meant I needed to go, at night or on the weekend when they were there, but we needed to keep in touch and we needed to keep in contact. So had we had something like this, it would have been a lot easier for people to share. I mean, it's a lot going on. We're really busy. So typing that out or writing it is just not feasible for people. And you really need to be able to communicate quickly. And I needed the emotion and the nuance sometimes to understand what what I needed to do or how to support people in this 24/7 operation. So that's one way I think would be immensely valuable, is for teams don't that don't all work at the same time or don't work in the same location, to be able to stay in closer contact.